Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Heritage Ohio's monthly webinar. Our monthly webinars are a benefit of membership for our Heritage Ohio members, and so we thank you very much for your annual support to Heritage Ohio. This month, we have a special treat, and we'll be talking about board development. And we have Sandra Hall from Main Street Wooster leading our webinar this month. And probably to many of you, Sandra doesn't need much of an introduction because we all know what Sandra has done over the past 27 years in Wooster, specifically working on the downtown and the amazing reinvestment that we've seen in Wooster, the new jobs, new businesses open downtown. Sandra was just saying that they now have 22 restaurants downtown in a community of under 30,000 people, which is just amazing. So you can learn a lot by listening to Sandra, and today we have her to talk about board development. So, well, let me say one thing. If you experience some technical difficulties over the course of the webinar, either picture quality or audio quality, a lot of those problems can be solved by just logging out of GoToWebinar and logging back into the program. At least that's what Devin Miles tells me.
So, he's the guru.
And he's right. He's the expert. So I listen to Devin. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and get started, and I'll turn it over to Sandra. Thank you very much.
Hi, everybody. Sandra here. We're going to do board development here, and actually this outline that you're going to see that we'll talk about was done by Mark Smiley and was used in a training and certainly board training for Heritage Ohio. So we're going to go through, and I think probably with experience of the managers and people that are doing this kind of development, we can add to that and some of our experiences. But board development, I think certainly when you begin an organization, developing your board is probably number one on the screen. With a Main Street organization that certainly in particular, you always start with a grassroots group, and it's a group that wishes to do something, and they're active and they want to go and do that. And a lot of them are doers, and but as the organization matures and as you grow and as your vision develops, board development becomes critical. And if you don't have a strong board of directors, the executive director and the staff are expected to do the vision and also do all of the work. And as you know, staff-driven organizations are not wonderful. Burnout is huge. That isn't what you're looking for, and that isn't what anybody is looking for success. Basically because not only will the staff be doing all the work, the community won't believe in your Main Street organization. The downtown won't believe in you, and I'm talking about the businesses, service-related, anyone who's in the downtown that as a Main Street you're trying to recruit into your vision of the organization's vision of what a Main Street organization should be. And the downtown will not believe in it if there is a board development and acceptance as you begin to spread out into the community with your message. And the community will not support your downtown either. So it's really something to think about, and I hate to be negative about it, but we've all experienced that. And when I first started, you know, one of the first things that people said to me was, "You're doing what? And the name of it is what?" And so then you go from there. And then the community says, well, downtown's dying or dead. Well, then you begin on your incremental 4 points and you start going, and then they say, well, something's going on. Well, what's going on? And all this while, the board needs to be with the organization and helping to develop that. And the board, the staff, and your volunteers have to know what your vision is. And the vision usually is the preservation and reinvestment of your downtown. There's a foundation for that mission of the organization and a framework for expectations that make it possible that we can do the day-to-day tasks and everybody gets on board with that. There's a real melding here of the doers, the volunteers on the grassroots level, the board development, which here in Wooster, the forefathers of this organization, and believe it or not, before I ever came on board, said that it had to be a community board and it had to bring to the table for the Main Street vision, and particularly the Main Street Wooster vision, it had to bring people from all over the community and not necessarily just downtown. They really felt that there had been a couple of downtown organizations, retail-driven organization with the downtown businesses, and then there was another small organization that quote-unquote wanted to do things for the downtown. They felt that these had failed because it was all downtown-driven and people were saying, oh, ho-hum, just another downtown organization. But if you have a board and you develop that board so that the people that are interested in helping with the vision and implementing the issues and the projects that the Main Street organization does, and they're from everywhere, from manufacturing to a doctor that's 2 miles away in an office who comes and who cares about the downtown. You have to have a good representation. Without the strong board, nonprofit organizations show limited success in meeting the community need. And that is absolutely true. It's kind of a sentence that's all-inclusive, but as you know from other nonprofit organizations that you've seen come and go, if you don't meet the need of the community, it doesn't happen because you won't get that support. The bottom line is, without a strong board, nonprofit organizations show limited success in meeting both your client and the community need. Your client, as a Main Street organization, is the downtown. And they have to believe in you, and then the community has to believe in you. And if they begin to believe in you, then that happens. The board development, I think, is really incredible because so many people are, at least in my experience here, a lot of the representatives that have been placed on my board actually were told by the CEOs of companies they're going to show up and they're going to be on that board. Now, our board has 2 3-year commitments, and that's it, 6 years, and you go on to other boards and other things. They are put on the board by virtue of the president or the CEO of their organization, and they say, well, we don't know anything about downtown. We live in the North End, or we live 15 miles away, and I don't ever come to the downtown. I go to Walmart and I go to Bueller's at the North End. Well, guess what? The CEO says you're going to learn about downtown Worcester. We've got an investment in it. We support it, and we want you to be there. And they become absolutely your strongest advocate for the downtown. And I often say, when the board members, the new board members come on and I go to coffee with them and we sit and chat prior to their orientation, I say, you know, what questions do you have? Well, we don't have any questions right now because I don't know a thing about it, Sandra. But give me some time and I'll start asking. And they become literally your strongest supporters. And sometimes I sit there and I think, I wish I had 26,000 of you. If I had 26,000 of you, this organization in this downtown would be 100% successful.
Hmm.
So board development, nomination and recruitment. Basically, you need to develop a criteria for board profile grid, and we have that, and Mark Smiley has developed one. Heritage Ohio uses one. We use one here at Main Street, Wooster, that was set up in the bylaws for us in 1985 when this organization was first formed. And you have to identify the right individual to meet the needs of the organization. And then you've got to convince them to become part of that organization. You identify recruiting prospects, and usually the best recruiting prospects come from your actual board. Certainly you see people that you would like to have on your board, and that is also worthwhile. But I often think that the board actually coming in and giving you, saying, well, John Smith would really be good because he has this expertise, and I talked to him about downtown and this is what he has to say. So you have that. You have a lot of ways, from your volunteers to your board to you to other people that say, have you looked at John Smith? Have you looked at Bob Jones? And you call a list, and then that list evolves. I just in the last 6 or 7 years, my board has changed dramatically from a board that's probably anywhere from 40 years of age to 70 some years of age. Now over half of it is between 30 and 45 years of age. And that's extremely important for this organization because we've been at this so long, and it's time for the quote-unquote young group to start taking ownership of the downtown. So that's incredibly important. You narrow the list of potential board members to...
Next slide.
Should
we be next slide?
Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I haven't done that very well, have I?
That's okay.
You narrow the list of potential board members to top prospects, and that's what your nominating committee does. And again, it depends on your bylaws how that nominating committee is to be set up. We have the chair and the past chair as the heads of the nominating committee, and then we have 3 members of our board who are not part of the executive committee that serve on that nominating committee. We also go to the board, first of all, the meeting before we meet with the nominating committee, and ask them about people that they think would be of interest or would care about serving. Sometimes you have to worry about that because it's one thing to work your way onto a board as a volunteer, head of a committee, chair of a committee, that kind of thing. And then there's the other way of having a board member say, well, I'd like so-and-so from Mutual Insurance. I think they'd be really good on the board. And then they just come on the board without having gone through the volunteer and really knowing what the grassroots part of the organization really is. I think you have to have, in my estimation, you have to have a little bit of each. You want people from 30,000 feet looking down on the organization, and you want the people on the ground level looking up. And when you have that kind of mix, it works very well. Assign a contact person to each prospect, and usually your board does that, and they'll go out and do the quote-unquote chatting with, talking to other people, finding out if we don't know those people. In this small a town, you pretty much know somebody who knows that person, so it's pretty easy to do. And I'm sure as a Main Street organization, everybody can do that with not a problem. Contact the top prospects and then conduct an orientation. Orientations, as a Main Street director, I do it at breakfast, and I do it early in the morning, and I promise them 1 hour, because orientations can be really informative and they can also be really boring. And so you have to keep a good balance so that you get through, you look, I send out the bylaws, I send out the packet, everything ahead of time, and then we can talk about those things that they're unclear of, and then we go to the really nuts and bolts, we go to the finances of the organization and all of those kinds of things, and certainly leave room for conversation and in-depth conversation that probably may go on later, because what will happen is some of your new board prospect or your new people that are looking to come on the board will not always ask questions in front of other people, and then you'll get the call, and then if they don't do it with the chair or the past chair or one of the members that recruited them, then they will call you and say, could we go to coffee or lunch and talk about this? So orientation goes on, I think, of course, basically, I think the first year, certainly 2 years, depending on the involvement of each board member. Okay, here's the grid, the board profile grid, and I think you can see this pretty well, but it's pretty easy to fill out. And you take your prospects and then fill out the grid as you know them. And depending on the balance of your board that you already have in place and that is still serving for you, you look at, say, you look at the check marks, and if that person is into planning and personnel management, if you'll look at, for instance, Lydia, she's got quite a few checks with personnel management, nonprofit management, leadership, and meeting skills. Okay, what does that say? To me, it says this person is probably, if she is interested and if this goes accordingly, she will soon be, within a few years, she will be not only heads of committee, she will be also on the executive committee, and then riding up to chair-elect and chair. And that's the other thing. You need people that you know when you ask your nominating committee, and when you're working with your nominating committee, you always have to look forward to the fact that they have the leadership skills that can they become your chair and chair-elect, because sometimes that's a real problem. They are very willing to be on your board, and they're very willing to do various things and fundraise. Maybe that's what they do best, is fundraise. But there's no leadership skill per se there, and they don't really want to be in that position. And so you have to judge that and balance your board accordingly. The other thing is, too, I have found is that when you develop your board, say the man from Mutual Insurance Company is on your board and he's put there by his CEO, what he wants to do on a committee is not necessarily economic development. He might want to do design. And so that's another thing, to not pigeonhole this person and let them be on all of your committees, the design, the economic development, the promotion committee, and give them a taste of everything. They will come to you and say, I don't like this. I really wasn't very happy with this. I think another point that we do here, and it doesn't necessarily mean it works for every Main Street organization, but every one of our board members, and I have a large board of 24, every one of them serves on a committee. They don't hit every meeting, but they are on a committee. They do most of the time show up, and they do take that as serious. It's one of, other than fundraising, and attending board meetings and helping with issues, they know this is what they need to be doing. So even though you have larger committees and you use your volunteers, your downtown business people, service-related people, community members who are interested in helping Main Street, every one of those board members knows that they need to be on a committee and show up. And that also gets the tick on the leadership when it comes down to them moving, quote unquote, up the ladder to be on the executive committee and perhaps chair or chair-elect. You can see the skills and knowledge part, the contacts and influence. That's extremely important. And then the demographics. I think one of the things that certainly in Wooster, demographics here, we aren't very strong in all of that, looking at that. And I'm not sure why that is, except that we're a small community and it's pretty much same. And the county is too. So we probably are down on that, and I would say that that is a weakness of our board development part. But the skills and knowledge and contacts and influence, that part of the grid, extremely in play all the time, and we carry it out through the year as we go ahead.
But just to jump in, you do a good job with the under 40 professionals in Worcester, and I think that's one important aspect of the demographics that a lot of organizations struggle with.
Well, because I'm elderly, I decided a number of years ago that I had to have a young group because they had to take ownership and they had to be, and I needed to listen to them because I was used to a very, what do I want to say, conservative, yes, certainly mixed use board, I call it, and adaptive, but we needed that energy and we needed that thinking that certainly is different from an age group that's 50 to 65 or whatever. You need that different viewpoint. And honestly, when they're all together, it's amazing how they interact and work. And I think the quote-unquote older group loves the quote-unquote younger group because the younger group loves to joke and tell stories about their experiences with downtown and certainly make fun of me. So that's great fun for them. And so it really makes it for a great genial board meeting that is very relaxed, yet if we have to deal with issues and elephants in the room, we deal with them. And they have a great aspect to that other people don't have. So recruitment and orientation, you give the new board members information on the background, programs, and culture of the organization. And actually, this is an ongoing, evolving thing because it goes on every month at your board meeting, basically. You give them the background. And as we go on, that people will say with an issue or a project that you're doing, well, what about this? Well, what happened 2 years ago that you changed and you aren't doing this, or you don't consider this something that Main Street should be doing? And I think that goes on, but you give them the basics of what it is what's happening now, what's a little bit of the background of why Main Street is there, and certainly the culture. And then certainly the organization's purposes, the major programs, and of course always the funding sources, which is so key to all of us staying in business. And like any nonprofit, it's always right at the top of the list of a of problems as well as good things. A list of expectations of prospective members, meetings, committee assignments, tenure and time commitment, membership and donations. This is really key. We talk about it all the time. I know that. We talk about it as Main Street organizations. And sometimes we think, and we do often have what everybody calls in any nonprofit deadwood. And those are people that are on the board for whatever reason, when they got there, and they just aren't really, they aren't connecting, and they aren't there. And so what do you do about that? Well, you have to actually bring it up and talk about it, and then if need be, the board needs to then discuss with that person what it is that they want to do with the board and be part of the board, or if perhaps it's time to move on because they've been there too long. Term limits helps that, because at the end of 3 years, if you really have a really member that is really not part of the program and enthusiastic and comes to the board meetings and seems to be add to it, then it's time not to ask them to come back for another 3 years. And they're probably going to say to themselves very quietly, thank you very much, because this really wasn't my gig. A list of current board members and key volunteers. That is oftentimes, when you say recruitment and orientation, boy, they ask for that right away. My board members, when they recruit other board members, they take that list with them, because they say it's one of the first things that the prospective board member asks for is, well, who's on your board? You know, and what are they doing? And the other thing that they always ask, I'm finding, is, okay, I read in the paper about this, that, and the other, but what are your key issues? What are the key projects you're working on? And is there a project that you're not talking about that you can talk about quietly, that you have a goal and you have an issue that you're trying to address? That is also often brought up with my board members going out to recruit. And then certainly a complete financial picture of the organization, the budget, and why the budget is set up the way it is. That also is extremely important. I have a number of board members that literally don't think that Main Street Wooster should be any bigger, quote unquote, financially than it already is. I keep talking about an endowment fund that I would like to see happen. And I think it's really important for Main Street Wooster to have an endowment fund. And there's a lot of question about that, and I can't get traction on it. So until I can get traction, it isn't probably going to happen. So I think that's kind of interesting. They don't, at this point, they don't want, I'm wondering if they really don't want any nonprofit to have a whole, quote unquote, a lot of money. They have seen things happen when organizations get too flush, and then things don't go well. So
what a problem to have.
I know. I haven't seen it. I've never been on one that had it. Schedule a visit with the prospective member to see the programs in action or talk with program staff. And again, oftentimes board members who go out to recruit prospective board members will take me with them, or they will go out alone. I actually would prefer that. I would wish that the first meeting would be board to board, board to prospective board member, and then if they need me, then we work that out and say the three of us will go. Sometimes a couple of the board members, and we're looking at prospective board members, will go out in groups. So there'll be 4 people plus me, and we'll do breakfast or lunch and talk about the organization. And then those board members, then we come back to the nominating committee and actually decide whether prospect A, B fills the grid, number one, or would be better now, and maybe this other one could be held for the next year when we bring people on. You can invite the prospect to attend a board meeting to get an idea of how the organization makes decisions and delegates responsibilities. I have to say, I think this is a great idea, but we have never initiated that and never done that here. And not sure why, but we've never even looked at that. I think most people belong on boards, know what happens to go on. They probably don't know about Main Street Board, but we've never done that. So if probably I'm not real good about that. Probably need to initiate it. Talk to others in the community about prospective recruits, their assessment of the strengths and weaknesses of the prospective board member. This is where I think the manager is so good at it, because you're walking the streets anyway, and you're talking to people every day about Main Street and about downtown or about your nonprofit. And because you're doing that, you pick up all the time on the people that you're talking to and the way they view things and the kind of doers they are. And that makes us as managers really invaluable to the board development process, because we know who's, you just kind of get a sense, you know who's going to really help you with the organization. And I think that's absolutely key. You have to know as a manager, when you look at some of the prospects that the board is looking at, you have to feel, I think personally, excuse me, this person is really going to be a positive addition. Mm-hmm. This person is really going to help the program. This person I could go to if I really had an issue. And I know that's selfish, but I think it works for success. And then make sure balance of board is representative of the entire community, not just downtown. And we do that with manufacturing, making sure there's a lawyer, making sure there's finance, making sure there are property owners, making sure there are downtown business owners, making sure there are service related. We also have representatives not only from the local government, but county government. We have the superintendent of schools. We have the director of the library. We have the Chamber of Commerce president. So we make it so that it is, College of Wooster is here, so I am very fortunate in having the wife of the president of the college on the board. She travels a lot with her husband and, of course, has College of Wooster things she has to do, but I'm telling you, you email her or call her and she's on it. Whatever issue it is, she'll get right back to you. And so that is really key. I think involving all these other parts of the community just makes Main Street Wooster that much stronger. Training, board development. Hopefully the training is going to go on, but hopefully not only that, but you hope that the board will help train you, I think. And that is something that has happened to me for as long as I've been in business here. They have helped to train me and make sure that I'm, doing the best that I can do. Regular efforts to build new skills and abilities among the existing board members. And, that happens with your new board members. Like I was saying, bringing in the younger under 40 groups certainly help to create a stronger older constituency within the board, I think. And they've become friends. I don't think they would have become friends if it weren't for the Main Street Board. So I think that's really good. Consult with the appropriate committee chair and staff to obtain full involvement of the new member and provide assistance in carrying out responsibilities. I think we do that as a staff, and we're all kind of type A, and we all kind of take on things, and we take on more than probably we should, because if somebody doesn't get something done, guess who's out there to do it? We don't want things to fall flat on their face, so we go out and do it. I think providing assistance is key here, instead of, okay, you go sit down, I'll take care of it. And that's very difficult for me. As a manager, I'd rather tell them when one of my board members has something that they were supposed to do, and they call me and, well, haven't done it, I think I can get it done by Monday. Well, instead of saying, oh, it's okay, I'll make the call or I'll do it, you've got to sit there and say, sounds good, I can hardly wait to hear from you on Monday. And that is very difficult to do, but it makes them a stronger member and certainly helps the organization. Provide opportunities for board members to attend workshops related to assignments and interests of the member. Certainly Heritage Ohio is really good about that with their trainings and all their programs. My board, there are some that are interested, but I can't get a whole lot of, they're busy people, and they say, Sandra, that's what you and Beverly are for. Go and bring it back. And they do ask about the training and all. It's not as good as being there. And I see that with you all, with other Main Streets who bring their board members. It's amazing. They really get their eyes open. But that's, again, I think that's a nurturing kind of thing, and sometimes you have to push them, I think. Provide leadership training to current and prospective officers. When we do our organization operations / committee is our executive committee. And basically we have old and new coming on to that executive committee. And they help provide that training. We have to do that by virtue of what happens. I am incredibly, incredibly dependent upon my executive committee because my board is so large. Those of you that have smaller boards, you don't have to do that. I mean, you should have an executive committee or 2 people that are go-to people for you. Certainly most of the time the chairs of your organizations want to be that go-to person, and that's why they're there to help you with that, but they want to be that go-to person. But if you have a smaller board, it's not so hard to communicate with all of them. I do not communicate all issues with my full board. I do communicate probably on a weekly basis 2 or 3 times with my full board, but mostly it's the exec committee. Expand responsibilities and rotate committee assignments to help satisfy the interests and needs of the board member. And again, I talked about this before. Make sure your board member gets off the grid of, say he's a banker at a bank. Don't put him on the finance committee. If he probably doesn't want to go there. He'll help you any way he can with finance, and he's willing to do that. But he'd rather be on another committee, and I have found that. So you give them all that give them that experience, of being on those committees, and then let them choose where they really love to be, and you're going to see that right away by virtue of their involvement and their enthusiasm for the committee that they're on. And certainly utilize Heritage Ohio as a board training tool. It is key to your organization, and it works because they've got the experience of all of us coming into them, and certainly our discussions on how not to do it or how to do it, it comes out with the positive how and what works best.
So I'm curious.
Yeah.
When you talk about rotating committee assignments, does that include committee leadership? Because it seems like there's a chronic issue with a lot of programs that they have a hard time getting fill-in-the-blank committee to have a committee chair, to keep that leadership at the committee level. So is there anything special that you do in Wooster to make sure that, or is it just more of the culture of expectation?
I think, for instance, like our promotion committee, we have so many events and all, that the head of that committee, that changes because of the work involved and the time commitment and making sure. Now, of course, Beverly is incredible because she implements all those events, and that's very unusual. And so that's very helpful for those chairs. But we literally make sure that those committee people change. Now, in the last couple years, we've had the same person be the economic development chair, and we actually started about 5 years ago having co-economic development chairs. And that was by virtue of the fact that economic development was so important, and we wanted people to feed into that chairmanship because we couldn't get one person to say, I will chair. If and Matt would say, if Brian can chair with me, we'll co-chair it, and then he can take over. And that's really working because usually I am finding that the economic development chair is one of those people that comes into the leadership. They run up the ladder very quickly, and so therefore they're feeding into the executive committee and chair, so that when they leave that economic development committee, we're lost without that leadership. And so then we've done that now for 7 or 8 years with this and it works pretty well. It works pretty well. But actually, the board kind of takes care of that themselves, and they move that around. And we do that at nominating committee. We look at the heads of committees too and say, well, maybe it's time that the promotion chair, he's been there a couple years, maybe it's time that, and they don't mind that. They're glad for that, I think.
But so the board has to be disciplined to look at the leadership roles on the committees to say if there's an issue that someone else from the board has to step up. It's like they can't just say, well, okay, I guess we won't have a committee chair.
Oh, no. Oh, no. We don't. We go, I mean, if the nominating committee can't get that done, then they come to me. And then we put our heads together, and then we decide. But we have knock on wood, I've never been without a committee chair, ever. I don't know what I would do without a committee chair. I mean, well, I know what I do. I take it all on myself, and that's what managers do. And then we wonder why we're,
sleep deprived and
close to nervous breakdowns.
Barely recognize our family
else.
members.
Yes. So, evaluation of your board, the annual task of evaluating them, the contributions, and evaluating the board's contribution to the individual board members. This is incredibly, I think, in-depth and somewhat complicated in that, are you sure at the end of the year that everybody has really had a good time? Have they enjoyed their year? Do you go to that board member and say, well, did you have a good year? Do you really like it? What's he going to say? And particularly, I think this one is very hard, particularly for a brand new board member after a year. I think it's very hard to evaluate that. You can begin to see how that individual board member is coming along, but I think it's into the second or third year before you really see how that evaluation can do. I have to tell you that my executive committee pretty much evaluates our board every month. They're looking at people every month and how that person has reacted to an issue or that kind of thing. In my 27 years, we have had one person that the board has had to ask. They were going to be in a leadership position, and they had to ask them to step down.
Before they assumed the leadership
yes,
position?
Because they were so negative. And you watch the body language in the board meeting, and I was on tenterhooks with this person who was very vocal, and they knew it, and finally some of the board members came to, not me, but to some of my exec committee and said, if that person stays on this board, I am out of here. This is not what I signed up for. And so when you get that kind of thing, you know you've got to react. And we were not proactive on that because the situation just kind of grew to a really critical point. Luckily, we've never had it except in this one instance so far. But it was, and you know what? We really didn't evaluate that board member as closely as we probably should have. She was not on the board very long, and I don't think we took some of this into consideration. So again, you have to be very careful about that and watching that. How well did this organization give you what you wanted? That's a hard question to ask. You know, I asked one of my board members this one day, and they said, in kind of a different way, but same thing, and he said, well, I love the wine tasting. I love the wine and cheese. And I'm thinking, okay. And he was being facetious, and we got into the conversation. But that's to get people to think about that it takes a little bit on the part of that board member. And what could be done to improve your satisfaction with this board. That is difficult for them to pinpoint too. These are really in-depth questions that I think is probably almost the heart and soul of this development issue with a board member. And what could the board do to improve relationships among board members? Well, I think one of the best things that you can do is not only do you as a staff person have coffee, chat on the street, have lunch, see at another function, sit down with at Rotary and make sure you have an off-the-board discussion about even Main Street or some other issue, and then begin to understand how it will come out to improve the relationship among board members and how that they click together and are together. An example, which I thought was kind of interesting, a few years ago, I had a note from one of the board members that said, I know I'm new, but some of these jokes that some of these people are putting out in board, I don't get. And they're laughing, and I feel very much out of it. And what is the problem? Or, I'm feeling uncomfortable about that. Boy, we went after that in a big way because that's not good. We needed to make them feel really part of it, not outside the boundaries or the parameters of the board. So we had to get at that, and we did, and it was fine, but very interesting. Specific things from your board agreement that you wanted to give to this organization as a board member. Were you able to give what you wanted to give? What could be done to improve your contribution? Well, some might say, I don't feel I gave you enough time, or I don't feel that I was really in the middle or understood the issue when we were worrying about streetscape or some of those kinds of things. Well, that tells you right there that maybe the board as a whole hasn't had an in-depth discussion about that. We've just done a comprehensive plan here for the city for the supposed next 10 years, really next 5, I would say. And I asked the paid consultants who were leading that, we had 3 different times that we called the board together and asked the consultants to come and talk about this comprehensive plan. None of my board, well, a couple of the board were on the steering committee with me. And I just felt that I could not, even though I reported on it every month, I really felt that since we were, a whole component of that comprehensive plan was about downtown, that board should be included. And they loved it. And you know what, really, the consultants loved it because they got, again, it's a different 10,000 feet above the city look at what it was. And it was amazing how some of the focus goals were changed with the downtown component because of the board being involved. So I think you have to look at that. Are you able to give what you wanted to give? If not, what is it that we can do so that you get to give that? They have to articulate as well as you understanding. I think one-on-one conversations are key. They don't have to be formal. They can be on the street over a cup of coffee at Rotary, as I said, and you get the board members to talk about the board, the issues, the projects, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And for heaven's sakes, always talk about the ugly, because it always works, and you always find out exactly what's going on and when. And then recognition. Always, always, always say thank you. However you do it, they always say 3 ways. If you can do it more, do it. Honestly, we have actually during the correspondence part of our agenda every month, there are various board members who have done things in the community or who are working on things. We bring that up and say, did you know John Smith did this week and they're working on this, and golly, that's really great, thank you. This is long going out of style, but I write personal notes, and I write them all the time to say thank you for lots of different things and to lots of different people in the community. Emails can work, a phone call can work, and it takes time, but it pays back in spades. You see here I put in, no, it's time consuming, but a note a day keeps the negative away. And it really does, because you send that note and they see you or they call and they say, thank you so much for the note. And then all of a sudden you have a different conversation about something. So, and then I think the annual meeting should celebrate your board as well as what has positively occurred during your Main Street year, and make sure that the annual meeting is a party and it's fun, and you just say thank you all the time. It's never I or me, it's always we, and it's always you. And when you do that, then they come. It's the best thank you there is. I think, and it's one of the ways that you can really have the groups all together, and they're all on the same page because they all love downtown. At least I don't know of many people that come to an annual meeting at Main Street and they get drowned out. So that's about it. Are there any questions?
We'll go ahead and open this up for questions. And we have one person asking if we can get a copy of this presentation. And what I will do is send a copy of this PowerPoint out to all of our attendees today. Look for that coming from us in the next 24 to 48 hours. So yes, we'll have a copy of the presentation available for everyone who's attending today. And if you have any other questions, you can feel free to ask them. Sandra, you said your board was 24?
Yes.
Do you, I guess maybe the question is, can you have a successful board whether you have 10 people on the board or 25 people on the board? And if it's not the size so much, what really makes the board work?
Well, to answer you about the size, I think that if I had come into the job 27 years ago and had to put a board together with the bylaws, I would never have said 24.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's very large. It's too large, really. Except then we've made it work. And so to say that it would be wrong, I don't think anything's wrong. I think you can have 4 people on your board. If they're all marching to the same tune and they believe and they're strong and, and want to do that. I think what's hard about, say, a small board like 4 or 6 is that the manager or the leader of the nonprofit is really hampered in that they don't have enough, global way to talk to their board and get lots of different viewpoints and direction. And direction is very important. When you're with type A personalities, you got to stay in your parameters because otherwise we're liable to go off and take the world on. And that's not exactly what we're supposed to be doing and what our job description is. So I guess, well, I don't know. I think the perfect board basically was 12 to 15.
Okay.
To say that, the boards I've been on that are 12 to 15 usually are very involved, very connected, and certainly very know exactly what they're doing and why they're doing it, and everybody has his or her job. But again, I have a couple people on my board that really don't, they're on committees, they're on the economic development, one is on my finance funding committee and the other's on economic development, but where they shine, when nobody else, and we go out for funding for pledge contributions every 3 years, and when it's time and every board member has said they take 10, and somebody, say Frank, you have only done 3, and trying to get you to do those other 7, you can't do them. Well, guess what? Those people will pick those up and say, I'll take care of it.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but did you know that your car is running?
Mine?
Yeah. So we can just turn it off and put the keys in the office?
I don't have the keys. I'll get it.
Are you planning to make a quick getaway after the webinar?
I've got this car and it's so quiet and it's keyless. And if I don't push the second time, it runs.
Oh, okay.
And they warned me about this. So, I'm so technically
That's
challenged.
a nice car you've got out there.
And somebody could just drive it off, too.
Oh, boy. You mentioned early on about board terms and serving 2 3-year terms. And sometimes we'll have a board where board members will say, oh, we've got 1 or 2 real leaders and we can't have term limits because they would both term off at the same time after 6 years, and what would we do without our 2 great leaders? And so what do you say to that when someone is reticent about the whole term limit?
Actually, my executive committee or nominating committee takes that on and just says, and they've said it, and they're all different. They just say, ho-hum, well, maybe you're going to have a quiet year. It's not going to be as leadership-oriented or as, exciting or whatever, but this will come again. And they are adamant about this because we have looked at, I have not wanted, there have been a handful of people that I have not wanted absolutely to leave, and I wanted them to be chair for 2 years, and we looked at that hard, and the board came up with, nope, we're not going to do this. This 1 year is good, and it keeps people moving, and it keeps the leadership fresh, and this is what we're going to do. Now, again, you've got a problem If you have a board that's 4 to 6,
Right.
then you've got a different issue.
Mhm.
I am with the larger board, then you have a chance to utilize people and bring them up. But if you only have 4 to 6, that is an issue.
Looks like we have a question. Do you choose board members based on their abilities to make large financial contributions? How does that fit into?
Well, you know, we do and we don't. We kind of know who we're going to ask for what. I mean, like the banks, we ask, say, $1,000 base, and then every 3 years we ask for about a 3% increase, and we don't ever feel that's very much. And our base membership is $150, but we have some downtown people, business owners, that are only paying $200 a year, and they're on the board, but they make a contribution.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody makes a contribution. And also, I think contribution to your events, like we have a wine tasting. Some of my board members can't come to that. It's our fundraiser. We make about $10,000 on that. And so they write a $50 check for a ticket, or they write a $100 check for they and their spouse, and they say, we're sorry, we won't be attending, but here's our contribution. And they make personal contributions as well as those representing their company. No, I would say no, we're more involvement oriented than we are money oriented.
Okay. I think you've got board members who do a great job with fundraising, it sounds like. Have you always had a board that has taken an active role and taken responsibility for fundraising, or is that something that has evolved through the years?
We've had better years than some and worse years than some, just like anybody, but they have always done it. And honestly, I'm pretty straightforward, as you know, and I always say I am not going out there to look at my salary, to find my salary. And I will go with you, and I will absolutely tell anybody that we're asking to help us to anything they want to know, but I can't do the ask. If you'll do the ask, I'll be there with the information. And so they do that, and they do the pledge card. So, and you know, I think too, when I started, they had to go out, this board who did not have a manager, they had to go out on the street, and they went out literally 2 by 2 and contacted people in the downtowns, feeling that if they could raise, and what Rubbermaid did at the time that Rubbermaid was here, they did a challenge. They said, if you raise $20,000, we'll match you with another $20,000 to get the program started. And so they raised $22,000. And by the time I started, they only had $13,000 in the bank, and if I'd known that, I would not be sitting here talking to you. Because when they gave me that checkbook and I looked at it, I thought, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? But they went out and raised that money, so it's always been kind of that way.
So even Sandra Hall has had one of those, what have I gotten myself into moments.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Oh, great. I don't see any more questions coming in. So it's been a pleasure having you for our webinar this month, Sandra, on building a better board. And I hope everyone will plan to join us next month. Our November webinar is on historic paint colors. And presenting that webinar will be Dave Mertz, the instructor from Belmont College's Building Preservation and Restoration Program. So we hope to have you join us next month. And until then, have a great day. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.